So for the sake of being better prepared for tomorrow's quiz, I'm going to go over this complex rational expression. And whenever you have a fraction, like let's say you had 8 plus 4 over 6. What do you do first on this problem? 8 plus 4 over 6, what do you do first? You add first, right? In other words, you simplify the top, and then you worry about, once you get an answer to the top, once you get 12 up on top, then you worry about dividing by 6. So that's the same exact thing we're going to do right here on this complex rational expression. We are going to ignore the bottom, just focusing on the top, get an answer up on top, and then I'll worry about dividing it by this guy down here. Okay, so I'm going to put a piece of paper or this rectangle over the bottom. I'm going to ignore the bottom for a little bit. In order for me to subtract these two fractions, what do I need? An LCD, right? What is my lowest common denominator? Well, you have an x here and an x minus 7 there. If anything repeats, you write it once, everything else comes down, and obviously nothing repeats. This is a binomial, x minus 7. This is a single x. So the LCD, your common denominator, will be both the x with the x minus 7. So I'm going to write that common denominator on both fractions, x times x minus 7. And of course, this first fraction, the denominator is x, but I need it to be this LCD of x times x minus 7. So what do I need to do to this x to make it x times x minus 7? Multiply by what? X minus 7. And of course, what you do to the bottom, you do to the top, multiply by x minus 7. Now this is where it gets a little bit more fun, because you really do have a binomial x minus 7 times a binomial x plus 2. So we're going to distribute x times x is, I'm going to write it over here on the side, x squared. X times 2 is positive 2x. And then negative 7, it's an ugly 7, negative 7 times x, that's a negative 7x. And negative 7 times 2, that's a negative 14. And yes, you could combine the middle terms, and that'll give you a negative 5x in the middle. So after distributing, you have x squared minus 5x minus 14. And then you do have take away this other fraction. But the other fraction, you got to ask yourself, what do you do to the binomial x minus 7 to get this new denominator, x minus 7 times x? Multiply by x. So times x, you're going to end up with an 8x up here. So now that we have that common denominator, we are able to write our answer over that common denominator, x times x minus 7. And of course, we are taking this numerator and subtracting this one from it. So the x squared, there's no other x squares to combine it with. So I'm just going to bring that down, x squared. And then we have the negative 5x that I need to combine with this. But remember, this 8x is actually a minus 8x. So you really have a negative 5x with a negative 8x. That'll give you a negative 13x. And last but not least, you have that minus 14 right there. Does that sound good? Now, that right there is the answer to the numerator only, right? We did this work, and it's up here on the numerator only. So we still need to divide it by this denominator, okay? So instead of, let me do this. Again, the answer to this top part is right here. And instead of this division bar, this blue division bar that I'm drawing here, I'm going to write it as a division sign. And then I'm going to rewrite this bottom fraction right here. So this is an x minus 14 over 2x squared minus 14x. Okay? So do we understand how I got the answer, which was this up here, and I divided by this fraction? Yay? I wrote it horizontally instead of vertically. You with me? Okay. So now I could focus in just on this problem right here. So the first fraction doesn't change. You're just going to rewrite it. But you might as well factor anything possible. The first fraction's denominator is x times x minus 7. It's already in factored form. Let's leave it like that. Don't distribute the x. That'd be pointless. Now, in the numerator, we do have a quadratic trinomial. The a value is 1, so maybe we could rewrite it in factored form. X. What times what is your c value that if you combine together is your b value? Negative 13. Anybody? What times what is the c value? Negative 14. That if you combine together is a b value? Negative 13. Negative 14 and positive 1. So negative 14 and positive 1. So this is the factored form of that quadratic trinomial. What else could we do? We're going to change this division to multiplication. And you do that by flipping the second fraction. So as you're flipping it, you might as well factor whatever you can. This x minus 14, you can't do anything with it. So let's just flip it down to the bottom, and it's going to stay exactly the same, x minus 14. Now, the 2x squared minus 14x, when I move it up, I could pull out what? A 2 and an x. 2x is the GCF. When you pull out the GCF of 2x, what's left over on the inside? X minus 7. And now that we have factored everything, right? We factored everything, and we have multiplication. Now you could cancel out anything that's identical both on top and bottom, which means you have a x minus 7 up here. The whole binomial cancels out with the whole binomial x minus 7 down there. And then you have this x minus 14 up here. That whole binomial cancels out with the whole binomial x minus 14 down there. And is there anything else to cancel out? Yes, the x. That's right. So we're going to take this x, and if you're thinking, well, wait a minute, doesn't that x belong to the 2? No, a 2x really means 2 times x, and we know we could cancel when there's multiplication. So that x up there cancels with this x down here. So that disappears, that disappears. The only thing left on your answer is the 2 and the binomial x plus 1. So 2 binomial x plus 1. That's your final answer to this problem. I think on the practice test that I gave you, this quadratic trinomial wasn't able to be factored any further. So you just left it like that and canceled out everything else that was possible. But right here, we were able to factor it further and continue canceling. That's why I ended up with this beautiful answer. Now, it could also be written in when you distribute 2 and make it a 2x plus 2. But I prefer this one right here because it's in factored form. Anyway, so that's just another practice problem that I went over, just so you could be better for one that's similar on the practice quiz and on the actual quiz tomorrow. Now, on the practice quiz, so this question right here is on the practice quiz, and you're going to do it right, and you're probably going to select the correct answer, and it's going to be marked wrong. I apologize for that, okay? Let me actually work through this once again. Now, your first reaction might be, well, I have a fraction, take away something else. Let me make this look like a fraction. And then let me find a common denominator, but don't do that, okay? Don't do that. Let me erase that. Why do I say don't do that? Because what do we have here? We have a fraction take away something, right? Now imagine if we had a simple version of that. Let's say I had 4 plus 8 over 6 take away 1. All right? Are you going to start messing with the 1, putting it over 6, or are you going to try to simplify this? Obviously, you're going to try to simplify this, right? 4 plus 8 is 12. 12 divided by 6 is 2. And then you could worry about taking away the 1. So even though your first reaction might be to make this into a fraction, let's not do that. Let's try to simplify that first fraction first, and that'll save you a ton of time. Now, what could I do to that first fraction? Here's my new division bar. I'm going to pull out a 3. What's left over on the inside? X plus 7. What's on the bottom? X plus 7. What do you know? Cancels, cancels. What you really have here, instead of the first fraction, you really have a 3 right there. Then you have a minus 6x that comes down. So you have a 3 minus 6x. Now, that's not a multiple choice answer. We could make this look a little nicer by switching the order. Have the x term first. So you're going to have a negative 6x first plus 3 second. And then, since we are used to factoring, we do have a 3 that we could factor out. But to make that x look even nicer, make it positive, we're going to factor out a negative 3, thus leaving us what on the inside? 2x minus 1. Now, this is the answer that I was supposed to type into your multiple choices, and I typed it in wrong. I think I typed it in as -3, 2x plus 1. So obviously when you don't find your answer there, you're probably going to select the answer that says none of these are correct, but that's not, it's going to mark it wrong. I guess my point is understand how to get this correct answer. On the practice test, you're going to probably miss this one because the answer is not there, and if you pick none of these, it's going to mark it wrong. But I'll give everybody an extra point on the practice test, all right? So don't worry about that. If you don't have 100% because of that one that you missed, I'll give you 100%. Everybody else, you're going to get that extra point anyway.